report of valuation, right? Not an appraisal. Sometimes they, throw in these like real rote questions, that's, CMA is not an appraisal. Only that document, produced by the certified licensed appraiser in Illinois can be called an appraisal. But a BPO is another form of evaluation document, and that stands for broker's price opinion. And I said, on the side, those are, in terms of, good morning, actually, in terms of, there's not a lot of time and effort put into a BPO. I told you a lot of times it'll be the loss mitigation departments of banks, like foreclosures, trying to get somebody into a loan mod or do a short sale, and they just want to have at least an area where they're going to get short on their note regardless in any of those situations. So they want to have an idea, what are some prices they're open to letting their property go for. So we're not going to go off on 136 again. We went through that. The one thing I really want you to take away from 136 is make sure market value is the most probable price that a property is going to bring in at an arm's length transaction. Most probable price, what's the arm's length? Seller is trying to get the highest price in that situation. Buyer's working in his or her best interest, trying to get the lowest price. Everybody's right. Everybody's working in their own best interest. Now, that compared to market price is the actual sales price that went down. So just don't get these confused on the exam and miss an easy question. Market value is, this is what the appraiser is giving, right? So that helps you in your mind. The appraiser, nothing's gone down, the sale, they're giving what they think the value is. Most probable price at arm's length transaction. I'll just put trans there. And then as opposed to market price. And market price is so you have to already have been dealing with a property that's sold, and you go back to look at the last time it sold, and you could call that figure, it's a market price, because it was what something actually sold for. So this is the actual, what you guys remember I do, probably, that's property today, what property actually sold for. And then there's that little discussion between, cost is what the materials, somebody pays for the labor, what it actually costs, and we had that little discussion about, market value does not necessarily ever equal market cost. And maybe right in the beginnings when a property is first built, you could argue that market value equals market cost. But the swimming pool is a great example, right? An indoor background swimming pool, the one people uses. You might pay 20 grand, the owner of the property might pay 20 grand to install it, but that doesn't mean that's what it costs, right? To get the materials, to hire the people to, lay the pool and everything. But then that doesn't mean I was going to be able to market my property at 300, but now because I put that pool in for 20, it's definitely worth 320 now. That's not a principle it just doesn't work that way in what we've seen in real property, goings on. So, but take that principle we just went over, because it's actually one of the principles we're about to dive into. That's also called the principle of contribution, because that pool contributed, it cost me 20 grand, but it didn't contribute $20,000 of value to the property. So let's go over these, because you could get a question that's on point to one of these, or that you know what that means when you're going to answer the question, right? So like I said, this would be in your appraiser class 101, and they start talking about, principles of valuation. This is page 137. We go through them pretty quickly because they're real, actually commonsensical. But let's go through them at a nice pace. So anticipation. The principle of anticipation is simple. It says the value, and we're talking about property here, but we could be talking about the value of anything. But we're talking about the value of properties here. Will be affected by a person's anticipation of an event happening or not happening. And it could be property prices going up, depending on it. And a good example is something cool opening around you. A big mall that wasn't there before. That might be one of the first things you put, or a couple of lines down in your MLS. Walking distance to Newtown Mall, a mile within, so the anticipation of that coming, new development going up, they figure they could charge more. Or if you didn't put it on the market last year, but you thought, let's wait for some reason. But now you do this spring, hey, we can probably get more than we could last year because now the mall's here. Okay, so otherwise it works the same way. What if they were going to put, I always use this example because it's one of the best that really hits at home. Like a toxic waste dump, any like where, whoever you want to draw that line, it's gonna affect, the values potentially under the value of anticipation negatively, right? People don't want to live near stuff like that. So that's anticipation. The value of change is real, like, kind of loosey-goosey, but, it's so true. No physical or, what do they say, economic, I want to say also mental condition is, doesn't change, right? Like the clouds, I always picture, like it's going to move by. So they give two examples here. A property could actually get affected by something dramatic, some act of God, right? And the value, obviously we got insurance hopefully and all that stuff, but, that's something that could affect a property, or, just at the forces of what happened in '08, right? What happened in '08, you don't know, and nothing stays the same. The principle of competition, so we talk a lot about, or at least in like 2 or 3 different places. We're a capitalistic society. The exam might ask you about the forces of supply and demand. And we said, supply goes up, prices are gonna go down because the market's been saturated with too much supply. Demand goes up, that's when prices go up too. I said, it's easy to remember, the price always follows demand. So if you get one that says, or you can maybe probably take that leap if they tell you this is what's happening to supply, maybe you can say the opposite's happening to demand, they don't come right out and say it. But price follows demand in the whole little bubble of economics. So what the principle of competition says is so back to just a 101 of supply and demand. So where you have graphs, so that's a true thing if you ever take an econ class, right? You'll have a supply graph and a demand graph. And every time these points are intersecting, competition, 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 right? So that's what this is saying. Competition happens because supply and demand exists. And if you have profits coming from the competition, profits bring more supply to an area. So let's take a housing development. You've got profits, you've got developers making money in these, let's just say it was new areas being developed, right? We're moving out into, it's an unincorporated area, it's eventually gonna have to have a name and come into another city or something, these developers start making money. Well, other developers, so profits breed supply, kind of bubbling up, right? So you're gonna have more developers come out, more developers, more developers. And for a while, Sam's good at this one in his review video here, because he gives this little, not spiel, but it's a good concept about excess profits tend to bring detrimental competition. Because the point is, back to the story, bubbling up, more people, but you're gonna get to a point where you stepped over that line, and now there's too much supply. Back to now, people were making, now prices are going down because one too many, competitors got into the mix, so to speak. So, just the principle of competition says, you got supply and demand, it's a capitalistic society. People are making money, well guess what? More people are gonna get in on that gig, and they're gonna start making money. And then you just, you hit a well, like the bottom of the well, however you want to think of it. But you're gonna hit a break-even point, and then you bring in more people. And so he says, when you listen to his video, he's got a good little catchphrase. Profits breed, competition, but excess profits bring, erroneous competition, or something like that. It's a good little economic phrase that I think helps with that. So the principle of conformity, we touched on this real quick in another chapter one day. I said, we're going to get to the appraisal chapter. The principle of conformity in value and property says, when things are in harmony with each other, they use that phrase here, harmonious, like we are talking about like the aesthetics in a sense, like the conformity of something. And it also talks about, I think in a couple of these, if you think that there's a maximum value, arguably, that you could make about most properties, that something could be being produced there, being done there, that parcel's getting its maximum benefit. We're going to talk about that specifically in a minute, but I like a couple of these that helps you say, because it's maximum value we're trying to reach, when you're valuing property. Because they use that as a guide to say, well, how much is it worth then? Because if it had a max, then you're almost like backing into it. So the principle of conformity says, if you take, and I use Western Avenue between, if you're in the city in Chicago, like it's between Foster and Lawrence, especially the west side of Lawrence, as just a good example. If you've ever driven past there in the last, 7, 8 years it's been now. It used to be a series of a whole, like, it's a long city block, so it was really 2 city blocks. It should have had an alley there, kind of, but that wasn't. So it was wrong. Single-family homes. I don't want to say that they were deteriorated, but because it wasn't that. But they never really had any like improvements. Those folks, just like my in-laws, had probably lived there since they bought it in their 20s, or a young couple or whatever, and they're still living there in their 60s, 70s, 80s. You know, I used to see one woman who, God bless her, I mean, she must have been in late 80s, 90s, still out there sweeping because it would flood there all the time if you didn't get the debris out of the sewer. Still, you know, she'd been doing it for years. But developers started to come in, and one by one, it took about 3 to 5, I can't remember, 3 to 5 years to get everybody's house. But they did it finally. There's not one standing there now, and there used to be about, in the teens, I can't remember exactly how many, but you kept counting them all up. And they're all now mainly 3-story condos, you know, with 3 flats. And some of them are 6 flats, you know, they just come up with a lot and into that style. But it looked, in the interim at times, so dysfunctional, you know, like when you had some of the older homes there, and not because, like I said, they were necessarily deteriorated, but just older in nature. And when you juxtapose what they were compared to these bigger things, let alone to how old they were compared to the new, you had both of, like, you know, the kind of buckets you could compare. And I was like not a proponent, let's just say, you know, I know that the principle of change is true. Nothing stays the same, but sometimes I like fight it, you know, because I like to give deference and stuff to things that have been around for a long time, you know, and like we gotta, like I've said in a couple classes, I might not have said it to you guys, but like if you tear down everything old, we're not gonna have anything old anymore. Like I wonder, like if, you know, some people that are doing it really realize, you know, what it feels like to probably be standing somewhere where you don't have any. I haven't been to too many like new cities. I think out west or something. But that the value of conformity says if everything is harmonious, then values of property are going to maintain and potentially then be higher. Both of those things. You're going to maintain value if you're in harmony with your surroundings, and you know increase, but go up. The value of contribution, we did that one already. That's the swimming pool. But you can take it either way. You can take, well, yeah, let's stay within one property. That's the easiest way to get your hands around the concept, right? The swimming pool, but let's talk about it on both sides, because we've only talked about it on the side that we put 20 grand into the pool. And it is one of the examples of that it might not translate into the 20 grand value increase. But on the flip side, they give you an example of, we've said this, and a lot of people know it, bathrooms and kitchens sell properties, right? People get wowed by, you know, these areas they're going to use all the time. And so, so if you put money into rehabbing or renovating, really, you know, bringing up a level your bathroom and your kitchen, well, you might have then just gone the other way of contribution. You didn't have to put as much cost into it, but you actually got, you know, more out on the other side. So it could contribute, it could over contribute, I guess, the cost, if you want to, it could go either way. And this paragraph gives it to you both ways. Whereas when they were just talking about it on the page before, the swimming pool just, you know, is one side of the coin. So make sure you understand, you know, coming at it from either way. It could not equal, cost could not equal, you know, its value and contribution standpoint, or it could exceed, you know, your expectations. Yes. Now this highest and best use, we said this one day because we did a problem together and it was one of the answers, and I said, one of the things, like, it wasn't a real thing. I said, well, highest and best use is a real thing in real estate, but we'll talk about it in, we're going over chapter 1 question together or something like that. Back to the principle, you come in saying, oh, every property has this maximum value. It could be appraised at. And if you're putting something to its highest and best use, well, then the appraiser's going to say, well, you know, everything, it is reaching that, you know, and I gave the zoning as an example. You know, you may have some choices of what you could put there, and if it were, you know, mixed use and, you know, you went more on the residential side, and you could have, you know, done more commercial, back to income producing, you know, just know that, start from the principle, every piece of property has a maximum value that it could be priced out as. And if it were being used to its potential, it would, reach the appraiser's, because, the reason I guess I'm saying it like that is every appraisal, if you see, it's not highlighted, but the last sentence in that little list says, the highest and best use is noted in every appraisal. So it's almost like, the appraiser says, what's the highest, and you gotta like then dumb it down for it not being used for some reasons that it could be. The same thing with increasing and diminishing returns. You get in your mind, okay, this property has like a maximum value it's gonna be able to obtain. In this one, right, when you're on this side, I guess you guys would be the other way. If you're on this side, you're adding improvements to your property, okay? And the improvements that you're adding, you can talk about a couple of these principles at the same time. They're contributing, they're adding to the actual value is increasing. You're on the side of increasing returns, right? It'd be the example where I'm doing my bathroom, doing my kitchen. It's adding to, my cost to do those things are adding, more to the overall value of that property. So I'm in that part of the curve where I'm increasing the returns. But then the theory, I hit that maximum point, and then I'm into a point of diminishing returns. And a good example that they give here is, let's just take a subpart, right? You rehab the kitchen, and it's a good example the book uses. And you made it look snazzy. Most people walk in, would say, hey, this is done really well. But then, that owner, and this is in here, took and went and got 24 karat gold, all the, fixtures, and went and took out the stuff that looked nice, put in restaurant appliances, that were bringing it above the cost that most average person would say that's worth something to me. It's not worth it's beautiful, I think it's nice, but I wouldn't come out of pocket myself to pay for 24 karat gold sink fixtures and whatever else we can think of fixture-wise that would be actual gold in the kitchen. So that owner surpassed, right, the cost versus value, what he was contributing. And he now is in the diminishing returns. He's putting more cost. Sam, I don't think he mentions it on the video, and I thought to email him today so I could start telling people. Well, I don't know if it's what to do. I guess he knows the guy, but he keeps adding to the property. And I don't know, extraneous stuff outside and stuff, but luxurious stuff outside. But like I said to him, and he uses that example, he's never going to be able to recoup, the cost of these things. And, he just said it once in the class, you know what I mean? But if you're ever, I think it's in Des Plaines, I think the properties in Des Plaines, to kind of see what he's talking, you're able to see something about it. So plottage, this is a true story. You may be like, Okay, as a principal evaluation in real property, this tends to happen. You have two parcels, let's just picture them adjacent to one another. Same acreage, whatever each, and you have it divided to sell the one, this plot 1, plot 2. Let's just put numbers on them. You were going to sell plot 1 for 50 grand, you were going to sell plot 2 for 50 grand. And that's what you would get for each, arguably each plot. But if you just combine them and sold it off as one plot, where we're going with this is, you would be able to ask more than just $100,000 for it. And you maybe 125, whatever, but something more combined, they're worth more than what the individual plots would have been, just adding them up. And here's one example of why that is a true statement. I'm sure there are more, but certainly this, especially in commercial, and it could be residential too. But if you have a business plan, back to commercial people, right, they're walking around with what it is they already either do, and they know they need exactly this or their business plan, and they need more space to carry out their business operations, right? So they're willing, they're valuing the way that property's put together in a different way, like if we were gonna buy parcel 1, parcel 2, to that person who was maybe willing, is worth more together. Obviously, there'd be a reason to you what you were gonna do, with the land. So I think the use of it is one good, little example to put to why that's a true rule in, as a general rule, at least for real estate. This next one, we're almost done, guys. The principles of regression and progression. So the principle of regression says, I always jump to regression is going to be lowering the value of your property based on the value of the your surrounding properties. And the principle of progression says the increase in value of your property based on its surrounding properties. So the little catchphrase that goes with either of them, I think it's easier to remember what they are with the actual catchphrase. The value of regression says, don't buy the best house on the worst block, because you can't control everybody else, and everybody else's worse property than yours is bringing yours down. So the value of progression says, do buy the worst house on the best block, because everybody around you already is building you up, right? And all you have control over really is what you do. So when you build your own property up, you know, you're only going to go up in that situation. So like I said, it's the regression and progression. Think about, if you want to use the catchphrase, regression goes with the worst block, don't buy the best house on the worst block, and progression goes the best block, right? Buy the worst house on the best block. And then the last two, you know, real general concepts, but the substitution one's very important because it's the basis of we've got these three methods to go through to finish this chapter off. But the principle of substitution says this. It's the principle of doing all of our CMAs also. It says that to value something that we'll call, you will in all your CMAs and stuff, your subject property, to value your subject property or the maximum value that it's going to be able to bring in. I said you can't go wrong talking about valuing something, maximum value, the maximum value it's going to bring in is finding a comparable substitute. You know, you can use, so back to what words are we thinking of with these? Comparable, meaning like substitute. Or at least we got to get to similar, right? Because we know no two properties actually are identical based on the concept of uniqueness, the characteristic uniqueness. So the principle of substitution says, I'm going to value my property by going out and looking for other properties that are like mine and see how much they sold for. And then we'll get at a value with this one is, because right, that's what other people were willing to pay for, properties that are like mine. So that's where it really comes from. If this is what supply and demand is producing right now out there in the capitalistic, market, then that's what this one's going to be worth. So don't forget, we're going to come right back to this. So then supply and demand, we've talked about it like almost, more than you need to know for the exam now. So that's just, these two forces are what, are driving competition. And competition, the crux of a capitalistic society. So people are going to be competing, arguably, right, for the substitute properties. Now, when we are looking for substitute properties, it's going to ease us right into the first of the three approaches to value here on page 138. Hey, Abby, the sales comparison approach. We're going to do. It's called the sales comparison approach, and then we're going to go over the cost approach. The sales comparison approach and the cost approach are both founded on the principle of substitution. That's how you value, you use both these methods for that principle of substitution. And the third one, and this is where that math problem is going to come from. So anybody that we were together on Friday, and I said, we'll wait till, today to do this math problem. It's called the income approach. And everybody will get one, maybe two math problems on the exam under this approach. Not these two. You won't get any math problems at all. Well, this one's simple, so you might get a math problem on this. The sales comparison approach, it is considered the best method, the most accurate method to appraise residential property. It's used mainly in residential appraisals. Like I said, it's considered the most accurate to use. And it's based on the principle of substitution. So we're taking our subject property, or I should say the appraiser, because now we just walked into the world of the three methods where an actual appraisal, the one we talked about, the licensed appraiser, they're going to be using one of those three methods we just threw up there. So they're going to base it on the principle of substitution, and so we're going to have our subject property that we're trying to give a opinion of value on, and we're going to be out there looking for and under the principle of substitution are comparable or quote unquote substitute properties. And since, like I just said, but it could be part of the question, since no two properties are actually quote unquote identical, for the mere reason that they exist in their physical geographic space that they do. We said even if down to the cookie cutter, fixtures and everything, it's exactly the same, which probably isn't too much happening anyway. They're still unique because they can't, sit on top of one another. Literally or inside one another. Right, so in coming up with, so we're gonna call them similar properties, right? Because we're not going to find identical, but these are our substitute properties. Which, everybody ends up calling, right, your comps, your comparables. They should be, ideally, properties that have sold within the last 6 months the appraiser is looking back at, and ideally properties to the subject property within 1 mile radius. So 6 months sold within last 6 months is one, criteria that the appraiser is trying to hold to, and then within 1 mile of the subject property. Now, I have had more than one appraiser tell me, if asked on the exam, you're looking at properties that are actually sold within the last 6 months, 1 mile. But I've had appraisers tell me they'll go out and get one property that's currently on the market right now too, and throw that in there, right? Because this is actual current competition right now, right? These have sold. A lot of times they have to put in, factors if like economics, big changes have gone on, and like, there was a point in time right back in 08 where we were still within 6 months of like a lot of bad stuff going down. So just a good example where they took in, to account some fluctuations in market change and stuff. But, so for the exam, we're looking at sold within the last 6 months, but a lot of live regional appraisers told me they'll grab that. Now, and then on the flip side too, they'll go out further than 1 mile, but know those, more rigid things that they like to see for the exam. But they'll just keep going out, until they can get something that they call, close enough that they can, but, similar enough. And you could get this little math problem. It's super simple. So because none of them are going to be identical, we're going to have to do an analysis for the differences and similarities between our subject property and our substitutes, or our comps. And if this helps you, then use it. It's one of these little things where I think you're just trying to always come up with, little techniques to memorize things. Because the book gives their CBS, which I think, okay, we got a TV analogy here, and then CPA, which is, right, a little business person. The little rule is if the comp is better, so, is better than my subject property. If the comp is better, I'm going to do a subtraction problem. If the comp is poorer, so if my, my subject property is quote unquote better, then I'm going to do an addition problem. And this is the example they give you in the book. The comp you've come up with sold for $145,000. You see the little analysis. You could have to go through on a problem on an exam. That property had a garage, and my property that I'm trying to evaluate doesn't. My property that we're evaluating has this, snazzy fireplace, but theirs doesn't. And they give values of them, of the garage of $9,000 and the fireplace of $5,000. So since the garage would be considered, a attribute to that property, so the comp was better. So from the selling price of $145,000, I got to back out $9,000, the garage, because my subject property doesn't have the garage. And then if you just want to do it all together, so I would have, if I did each math step right, I'd be at $154,000. And then because I had that fireplace and they valued it at $5,000, comp poor add. So now, hey, wait though. Oh wait, I did add here, didn't I?
Yeah.
Wait a second, I'm going the wrong direction. Thank you, sorry. I was supposed to subtract here. So, 136,000. So I found one that sold at 145. They had a garage, I didn't. I had to subtract out that $9,000. Oh, all arguably now would only be worth my subject property 136. Oh, but wait, we have that neat fireplace attribute that they did it for $5,000. So let's take the 136, because the comp was poor, and add in our snazzy fireplace, so we're at 141. So we would go in, I'm sorry, if that were CMA, the appraisal would, produce a report, right, this is real, bare bones here, that the property is valued at 141. You could get that, it's an easy math problem if you get one of those. So if that helps you, CDS, comp, better, subtract, comp, for, add, but I think this is real comprehensible. But you do that analysis, to what? To figure out differences and similarities, that's all we're talking about, it's just real simple stuff, and that's kind of the beauty of this whole profession. You know what I mean? It's very rote in that way, and you get to know areas better, and you get to be more comfortable with things, just like anything else you've ever learned. So, it is nice to feel like, come together, and we'll soon be over this first hump. I hate talking about the cost approach, because if, you really were using the cost approach, it's heavy, right? It's more detailed, these are expensive appraisals to buy. Not many people are buying cost approach appraisals. For maybe older properties, like more historical properties, like those sorts of things. Because if you have an income producing property, which is a third one way to get to, you're doing that approach, right? This is, like I said, could be, probably is some sort of commercial older building, could be residential, but probably not. Yeah, we're calling in an appraisal for, the Illinois State Building that supposedly is supposed to be sold at some point. I'm just giving an example. So, bear with me on this one, because you could get a question about this, but a lot of times the question comes and you kind of figure out what you're being asked about because it's so out there to begin with, in a sense, or we probably won't get to it math-wise, but I told the other folks that left me on Friday, make sure you do all those 25 problems. Troy, so we did the 17 together in class. Do those 25 at the end as well, because they asked at least 3 different questions about a property appreciating and depreciating, and having to know how to do that math. But that's part of the cost approach, taking the structure and figuring out its depreciation. So that's where they're kind of pulling out a little bit from this and testing us on it. But the cost approach says, look at the 5 bullets with me if you want, if you're on page 139, because this is what you do. You take the land that the property's sitting on, and you value it as though it were, vacant land, basically, and being used at its highest, going to be used at its highest. Well, put it this way: you value the land that it would be used at its highest and best use, and you put it to the side. Then you go to the structure that's on it, and you have to decide if you're going to come up with evaluating the cost of building that in one of these 2 ways that we're going to go through on the next page. But you do that. You figure out how much would it cost to build a structure. Then you take the next step, because you're building it in today's present value money, right? You put out there saying hire, contractors hire. You say, how much does it have to depreciate? And then you have to factor in the depreciation of this potentially older building. Then you go back and you add the land value to, now that you have your structure value, and then that's the appraisal value, right? Because remember when we did chapter 1, and there was a little thing in italics, and it might have even been bolded, and it says, for the state exam, land does not depreciate. And this is what we're talking about here, because we teach this appraisal chapter. So they just appraise the land, put it to the side, because the structure is done differently, because it does depreciate. The physical structure of that building, because we said if you don't keep it up, if you don't maintain it like you should, more likely than not, you're going to get into, as an owner of real property, some depreciation problems. So you have to figure out how much it costs. Your 2 choices as an appraiser are figuring out what method are we going to use to say how much it costs. They're over here: reproduction or replacement. And just like you think, reproduce is exact. And I want you, if you're taking away any words from this page, if you chose the reproduction method to figure out the cost, it's an exact duplicate. And what we mean by that is, we're going to learn this word about functional obsolescence on the next page. When things were built old, because technology and just ways of doing this has changed, right? You've got, heating systems and bathrooms and kitchens and all these things that are obsolescent. So they should have been updated and they're out of style, basically. It's like a silly kind of word